Hi, welcome to the Coaching Game. I'm Laurie Lawson, and tonight my guest is Ann Papayoti. Hey, Ann. I
Hi.
am thrilled to have Ann. She's a coach, a speaker, and the way I got to know her, she's a co-author of a fantastic book. And I will guarantee you, let me just show you her book right now. Let's see if I can get the sun off it, whatever, The Gift of Shift. And I guarantee if you are lucky enough to read this book, you're going to know her too, because this is a very honest book. So, Ann, thank you for being my guest. I'm thrilled to have you.
Thank you, Laurie. Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Good. Tell me how. Well, tell me, you're a coach. So first of all, tell me how you got to be a coach. What happened? Because my theory is that none of us as children go, oh, someday I want to be a coach, because I don't think we knew what that was at the time. So how on earth did you get to the point of becoming a coach?
Absolutely not. Did not know what a coach was. Was coaching, I think, like most of us in this field, long before we knew what it was. It chose me, as people like to say, rather than it. The story is, as a child, I was the go-to girl for friends with problems. And I was known as a good listener. In fact, I think in my high school annual, someone described me as that. And I did not know that would be foundational ultimately to my life's work. I went on to university, started in business and finance. Professors were saying, this is great, but you should be in journalism. You have a gift for writing. And in that, I listened to them and I explored it, and I went and checked it out, and I started doing it, and I loved it. And so I understood the power of asking questions to help other people rebuild their stories and their truths. And so I ended up majoring in journalism, and out of school, or to get out of school, actually, I did a study abroad quite reluctantly in Europe to get some credits behind me.
Reluctantly, okay.
As in foreign language, and did it quickly.
Oh.
And I did that. And when I came home, I wanted to see more. And what a great strategy was to get paid to see the world. So I became a flight attendant, and that evolved into a 17-year airline career. And I just worked my way up in the airline and through training and facilitation and using other skill sets that I loved. And ultimately, my heart landed in global diversity and community affairs. Now, while my career was climbing, my personal life was experiencing a lot of turbulence, as they say. I had married, I had given birth, I had lost my first son, unfortunately, in infancy. I had had another child, and then I went through divorce. And it was during this time that I went as a participant to a support group in my local community. And at the end of that support group, the leaders tapped into me and asked if I would take it over. Myself and another gentleman in the group. I said, I'm not ready. I'm not healed. And they said, you're ready. And no, you're not, but you will continue to heal. You can't help but help yourself along the way as you guide others, but you're where you need to be to do this. And you have the skill set. And I started doing that 25 years ago, Laurie. And what I found was that people always wanted more of me, and they wanted one-on-one time. And I started kind of doing that without recognizing what I was doing was coaching. I certainly had learned a lot, though. Once I finally really did become a certified coach, there was a lot that I was not doing as well as I could. And that's why I chose coaching. Eventually, I remarried. And in that remarriage, I moved away and forfeited my career after 17 years to support my husband in the pursuit of his. So something else to grieve. I have a laundry list of loss and transition and triumph in my life.
Learning experiences, yes. Life lessons.
That's right. So when we relocated and got established and went through some more tumultuous times in life with a child and a health diagnosis for him and some learning challenges, I started at a women's center offering personal development courses and support group. And from there, I wrote that pool was there, one-on-one time again. People was having coffee and having lunch. People are at my home, my cat's in their lap and they're staying for dinner. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with this? And I started I'd heard about coaching at this point,
Mhm.
and I started looking into it. But I became a fitness instructor instead. It took 4 more years for me to finally just actually go and do it. And so for about I think I'm in my 7th year now of officially certified coaching. And I learned a lot, of course, through that certification process to be a much more empowered person using the innate skills that I already had. But here I am.
Yeah, I love it. And oddly enough, I had none of the experiences that you had, but I feel that we are kindred souls in the sense that I climbed the corporate ladder too and got to the top and went, is that all there is? Because I'm not happy here. And so I went off and did some other things. And at one point, I looked at my resume and I go, what on earth am I going to do with this? This makes no sense at all. And who's going to, where am I going, And then suddenly, after coaching, I have to say, after coaching, and I had heard about it from a television show called Starting Over, and it was like, ooh, I wanted to be in the house with the coaches so they could coach me. But I said, it all sort of came together. It's like, oh, everything was kind of building, and I would give that advice to anyone who is going, what? It's like, it will make sense eventually, right? Do you agree?
Absolutely. It's just this path is leading you, leading you there. And all those experiences were for a reason. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me where, and let me give some credit to Tracey MacDonald, because she's the one, I can't make this book there.
There it is.
It's called The Gift of Shift. Look it up and you're going to find it on Amazon. Because she's your co-author, and she's the one who kind of got this whole ball started and sent me the book. And it's like, whoa, this is one of the best things I've ever had the experience of. And it is definitely an experience. So tell me how it came about, and then we'll talk about what it is.
Thank you. Well, Tracey and I actually met at coach certification training. We were both living in Canada at the time, but we signed up for certification in Miami because we had to get out of this.
That makes sense, yeah. We need a little warmth, yes.
Yet before we knew that about one another, we had already gravitated to one another. And literally, I saw her and there was something about her, and I went and I sat near her and we started a conversation, and literally were connected from that moment and became steadfast friends. She's much younger than I am, but and we've had very different life experiences. And I call her Sunshine and she calls me Sparkles. I'm for whatever reason, but here we are. I know why I call her Sunshine for sure. But we gravitated to one another and connected on so many levels. And once we went back home to Canada, even though we were in 2 different provinces, we started collaborating because we just loved talking about all things coaching and the gifts in opening perspectives and guiding people to their own insights. And so we created workshops together. And then she would come to Quebec and we would give these live workshops in Quebec, and I would go to New Brunswick and then we delivered them there. And the collaboration just continued to go. But from that point, I kept saying, we need to write a book. Well, writing was my thing because, again, journalism major, and I'd always wanted to write a book. Since I was 17, I knew I would write a book. I just thought it'd be a novel. But life took me down a different path. This is my genre. Maybe one day there'll be a novel, but this is my genre, self-help. It just is, again, the path. Tracey's like, no way. I don't write. It's not my thing. However, she's an amazing content creator. She's a vlogger. She's the video girl. That's where you find Tracey on social media, where you'll find me writing. She's creating video content. But eventually, I think I wore her down enough that she was at a point, I believe she said she was on her yoga mat meditating, and it came to her, yes, we do need to write a book together. And we had a workshop titled The Gift of Shift. And she said, and that's it. It's going to be The Gift of Shift. It's the one. Let's do it. And it took on a life of its own. And of course, the workshop was not what the book is, but it was to guide them to some of these same insights.
Great. What year was this? Because I can think of, a lot of shifting that went on in 2020 and 21. Was this prior to or during or?
The workshops were prior to, I want to say 2016, 2017. 2018, we were doing workshops. I moved from Montreal to Texas in 2019. And then, of course, the world shut down in 2020. We started writing the book in January of 2020, pre-pandemic. So by the time we completed it and published, it went to market in December 2020. So some of the chapters were written pre. There's all of the stories there is a collection of life stories were, of course, happened pre-pandemic, but I got stuck in one story and I was able, Tracey asked me one question, that's the power of questions, that reminded me of something that had nothing to do with the pandemic, but it brought me to a point, oh yes, and that's what I'm experiencing right now in the pandemic. So that ended up creating one chapter in the book for sure.
Which chapter is that?
The Gift of JOMO, Joy of Missing Out.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that. I love the terminology, JOMO, the joy of missing out. Yeah. Which is we're going to talk about. Well, I'll try to explain a little bit about it. It's a series of short stories, short anecdotes, real stories, whatever. And Tracey and take turns with each one. But it's not just stories. It's amazing. There are coaching questions. And then there's an opportunity to write your own story. And it's like, oh man, this book is full of my own story. So the format is what I think is so effective and unusual. How did that come about?
That was just, I think Tracey and I were brainstorming and we were recognizing how people really, really learn from story. I knew from leading support groups all these years how people would transform from other people's stories. We hear our truth in someone else's story. And I'd recognize that people would refrain from their truth. They would hold back, they'd minimize their own experience until they heard someone else reveal it. And then they'd say, it's that whole Me Too thing, right? They'd be like, me too. Me too. Actually, I did, yeah. Whether it was something negative in their life, even something positive. And so we agreed that the personal story was the way to go. Let's share our personal stories and allow people in, pull them into our story. And while their story would be different than ours, the theme of the story is common to life. We've all experienced betrayal on some level. We've all had to find courage. It's for something. We've all had to hang on to hope. We've all experienced grief. We've all had to figure out how to be true to ourselves and quiet that inner critic. So all of these themes are common to our life experiences. So we thought, let's share our story, help people go, okay, yes, I've been there, maybe in a different way, but yes, I get it. And then ask these questions so people can start sort of brain dumping their experience. And then those questions can be the outline for, as you said, we have this place for self-reflection. Now they can just write their own story about that theme in their life. The goal, Laurie, of this format was for people to just be either reminded of a time when they tapped into a strength or a character trait to overcome a challenge, so they could be reminded now and use that for a current situation, or recognize, you know what, I'm still stuck in this story in my life. I'm still stuck, and use those questions to start, sort of create movement and momentum so they can start moving through it and release it in a healthy way.
You guys were such pioneers, though. I love what you said, because I remember when I was doing coach training also, or taking coach training, you would sit in a circle, and as people went around, you go, "You felt that?" I thought I was the only person in the whole world that felt that. So that there was a universality about it, but the pioneering part was one, telling the story, because that's become a hot topic now. But I'm not so sure that it was when you started this, and the value of a story. And okay, that's great to tell your story and become vulnerable and reveal. But then to take it one step further, it's like, what you going to do with that? You know, what you going to do with that story? Now, that's a cool story, but what are you going to do with it? And that was, I'm not even sure a lot of people are there yet. It's like, oh, let me tell I mean, it's courageous to just go ahead and take that step and tell your story. But it's like to say, okay, now what? Now, how is this going to be used? And you've done that in this book, which is just amazing.
One thing that I also realized, and because I've taught adult personal development for so many years, whether it was, with the airline and when I was in training facilitation and whatever the course was, I just became the subject matter expert and delivered it. But for 12 plus years for the Women's Center in Montreal, and I'm still doing it now because it's all virtual for them now, is I create courses and a development for women and deliver it. And a lot of times I just come up with the title and then I write the content. But one thing that I've also learned is that people become overwhelmed. Like they'll go buy the self-help books, but they become overwhelmed with the scholarly content and the education that's in it, the way they're being told, how to help themselves. And they put it down. They never finish it. They highlight a few key phrases, but they don't know how to apply it. And so that's the other beauty of the book that Tracey and I've created here, I believe, is that because it's short stories, because it's little snippets, because it's relatable, because we then turn it back to the reader for reflection with guidance, because not everybody can just journal, in the moment. What do you
like you said, not everybody knows the right questions. I mean, or any questions. It's like, yes. I'm stuck. So you just move them along with that.
So I think that's another, I think, gift in this book is that it's short. It's about, you can do one story a day, one a week, one a month. You can, take this book on in whatever size chunk you want.
You don't have to do it in sequence. I mean, you can just start with whatever topic seems to talk to you, but in its totality, I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's a very simplistic. You're welcome. A simplistic yet so powerful masterpiece, and I think it all comes about with the way you guys were just so vulnerable and authentic. That takes so much courage, and it encourages others to do the same, but also. And how much thought you put into it about, well, here's what I learned. What can you learn? And what's your story and what can you learn from it? What was the most difficult? Would you all do about 6 stories each, something like that? What was the most difficult one for you?
People would think that it was The Gift of Charlie Brown, which is the story that is about the loss of my child. But that wasn't, because I love to share his story, because it's about overcoming grief and loss and finding true meaning and purpose. And I think we've all had some kind of pain. And when we can turn that into something meaningful, there's such joy in that. And he would be 28 years old today. So it's something that, and I love to speak about him. So that story is something I've shared for so many years. It wasn't difficult to write at all. The hardest one was The Gift of Jomo, the one that really has to do, because we were all in this same kind of emotional trauma, uninvited change at the same time, and this swimming in uncertainty and disappointment and, where are we? And I was trying to figure out how to write about the pandemic and I was like, I had one more story to write. I knew that my other stories were, I'm going to write one about each child, one about my current husband that's about being true to myself, and one about the betrayal in university, which sort of started me on this journey of loss because of my choices and therefore consequences. So I knew those, but it was getting my 6th story that I was struggling with. And I thought it needed to be something to do with this collective experience, but I couldn't figure out how to get started. And whatever Tracey asked me, she goes, well, I don't know about that, but you remember you used to tell me about this? Please, what about that? And I went, which was about me moving to Montreal and giving up my career and starting over and choosing joy over fear, because I see joy as love and fear as necessity in that circumstance. And I'm like, okay, now how can I apply that to this? And so to make it universal. And then I realized a lot of us have had to start over in life for one reason or another. And it's like, okay, I chose to give up my job. Not everybody does. Some people lose it by being fired or attrition or aging out. You know, we've seen so many things with the pandemic. But when you can find that perspective of what you gained because of what you quote unquote lost, there's joy. And so during the pandemic, what I found, you know, we all saw that some people kind of clung to, you know, in the beginning, I was like, yay, I get to stay home, you know, because we were run ragged, some people. Mm-hmm. And then other people were like, I'm stuck at home. Same outcome. Everybody was home. But some found joy and said, okay, I'm going to learn how to bake bread. I'm going to learn how to quilt. I'm going to learn how to garden. I'm going to start biking. I'm going to do whatever. Other people were just so caught up into what they could not do that they missed out on the newness of change. But as you know, change is hard for people. But who knew it would go on this long, right? So now we're kind of stuck in this longer, you know, how are we going to create this new healthy normal for ourselves?
Right.
And that comes to that individual level. And at the end of the day, it's choice and it's joy over fear. And it's not easy, but it's necessary.
Definitely. And because when you read it, you go, the joy of missing out. What on earth could she be talking about? But then again, we all missed out on a lot. I mean, I'm in New York City, Broadway closed. It's all the reasons I moved to New York City, they're gone or they're coming back slowly. But I have learned, I guess I've learned to adapt and do without in some cases. The joy of missing out of the way it used to be when I would go to the studio and people would come to New York City means I get to have you as a guest, you know, and because I'm nowhere near Texas, but we're able, because everything's being done by Zoom now. So I understand that. It's funny, I didn't apply it to the pandemic until you just said that, but that's exactly what some people were doing. It was like, oh, well, this isn't my life. What is this? And how am I gonna fix it? How am I gonna deal with it? How am I gonna enhance it? Whatever. But so yeah, I can understand that. What is missing? What story would you? Oh, I wish I told that. Or what story has come up, or what lesson has come up since you wrote the book? I'm trying to convince them to write another book because I love this one so much. So I'm hoping I'll get her started on that.
There are so many stories for me that aren't in this book for sure. I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. What I can tell you that I reflected on heavily was whether to share the first story, The Gift of a Band-Aid, which was about betrayal at university. I thought that's so long past. But what I'm just hearing from readers, I had one reader who read the book and then bought a copy for his sister. And she has never sought any kind of therapy or coaching or talked openly about an experience that she had in her teens. She's now in her 50s. And that chapter and the book in general, he said, it created a dialogue between the two of them as siblings. It opened her up. And he said she's like started a healing path for her. And that made it, in that moment, I'm like, that's it. Okay, no doubt now that belonged in the book, you know? So yeah, it was more about choosing what to put in the book, I think, than So now it's like, what would I put? I'm going to start thinking on that, Laurie, and you're going to be the first. After
what tell us quickly, what is the Band-Aid theory or the Band-Aid story?
And it's not about putting a Band-Aid on something and ignoring it. It truly is about going through betrayal, which is one of the worst, human experiences, because our world gets turned upside down. Everything we thought to be true is now gone. Trust is broken, and rebuilding trust is a lifetime of work in everything and anything. But this was just where my best friend betrayed me, but it was a very hurtful, cruel way. It was a very deliberate kind of chipping away and making me think everything was okay. Mm-hmm. And it was, even though my boyfriend and I broke up, she knew my heart. And we broke up with the intention to bring us back together. And it was the person I thought I was going to marry. She was my confidant about all of it. And she went behind my back, and they ended up together. They're still together, Laurie. They have a beautiful family. Things turn out as they're meant to be. It was the way it happened. But there were so many lessons in that for me. But it took me a long time to get there. So the betrayal of the friendship was devastating to me. I had had a happy childhood. I thought, you treat people well, they treat you well. I'd never had to deal with adversity in this way. And here I made it about me. So I thought, what's wrong with me that she doesn't want to be my friend, that she could hurt me so deeply, knowing my heart. And if she wanted what I had, I would have given her anything I had, maybe even him. I don't know, but it was the way it was done was so hurtful. But the lesson was, what anyone that says or does is about them. It's not about you. But I began to, that betrayal had happened, was over and done with, but I started betraying myself, and I lost who I was. And in losing who I was and losing my self-confidence, my self-esteem, my choices were in alignment with being lost. So I overdrank, I overate, I started underperforming, underachieving, and lost my way. There's a little curve of time, and I look like I'm okay. I look like I'm hiding behind the mask of achievement and accomplishment, and I'm moving forward in life. However, that
tell me the Band-Aid, because we only have 30 seconds.
Oh, okay. The Band-Aid is, you have to cooperate with time and let your wounds become scars.
Right.
And sometimes you have to put a Band-Aid on it, quit looking at it, quit talking about it, quit focusing on it, and healing will begin.
Okay. Well, I want you to start thinking about your new book. I want you to tell people, I love your coaching name, Skyview Coaching. Is that it? How can people find you and what you're doing?
They can find me on my website, skyviewcoaching.com. Facebook page is also Skyview Coaching. Social media, Twitter and Instagram is going to be Ann Papayoti. They'll probably find that in your link, because Papayoti's that easy group.
She's not hiding, so go find her, because she's doing some cool stuff, and I hope they're going to be doing a book together. Thank you, Ann Papayoti, so much. And we're going to hear you on the radio show pretty soon. So take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Laurie.